workbench today we have a Gibson GA-30. Took me a while to find a schematic for this because a typical GA-30 has 2 volume pots and a single tone pot. This version also has an unusual tube configuration. Has 6v6s for the power section, but it has a couple of 6SQs and a single SJ7 here. So there's our SJ7 and here's our 6SQ7s. These have diodes in them, and the diodes are basically just wired straight to ground. So they're pretty easy to deal with, although when you first see the tube data sheet for them, they look pretty interesting. Inside we have a Jensen couple of speakers here, a 12 and an 8-inch, I believe. And this cabinet is in lovely shape. You know, they were saving a bit of money here. They just got kind of the glue-on, you know, Tolex kind of logo. But it's in beautiful condition. And so the reason this was difficult to find, this schematic, is because it's from 1949. They only did this version very briefly, and of course people who work on old Gibsons a lot are well aware that they mix and matched in the factory with a variety of things. But anyway, this seems pretty good. The schematic seems pretty good according to what I've seen inside the amp. But let's have a look inside the amp. Before we do, we'll just have a little look at that switch tone expander. So first things to notice, somebody has put a 3-prong cord in this, and how Gibson have this designed is they have a switch on one side, and that's the hot side, and or it could be the cold side. It's hard to tell looking at this, right? And then the fuse on the other. Normally we would have the hot side coming in, hit the fuse, then hit the switch on the same side. They've done it one on either side, and this was wired so that the hot wire came to the switch. But then what you really want is you want the hot wire coming straight to the fuse. So if the fuse blows, then there's no voltage at all coming onto this chassis. Okay, this seems pretty solid here. I'm not going to mess with it. It doesn't look good, but it seems to be pretty solid. Somebody's got to come in here and done a bit of work. So there's a firecracker here, and this is either side of the GA-25C. They've also traded out a tone cap here. Coupling caps are new 0.05s, both of these. Now the schematic calls for a 0.02 and a 0.05. Well, there's a couple of 0.05, so we'll have to get a look in there and see where the 0.02 is. And actually I think that's it back there. These resistors look pretty good, the ones here that they've replaced. Where we do come afoul a little bit of the schematic is we've got a couple of 270K resistors here, and coming off there we have a 22 UF, and that's not a problem. There's a filter cap, right? But actually what the schematic calls for is 2 10s with a 47K in between them, and that 47K is going to considerably alter the voltage going up here onto the plates of the drivers, and it's going to also change the voltage coming up here onto the 6SJ7. So we'll rewire that. I've got some carbon comp resistors that I'll put in there to rewire that, and I'll put in 2 10s, 2 10 UF caps, filter caps. The next thing we see is 250K resistors, one of which is joined to nothing, goes nowhere, and the other which is joined into this is the negative feedback. We also see a 10 UF cap which goes nowhere, not connected to anything. So I think what somebody has been in here trying to do is trying to, actually when we look at this is our tone expander. This blue wiring is new in here. So somebody's been trying to figure that out, and they didn't get it quite right. So there are 150K caps. When we look here, we see coming off the screen grid, we see two capacitors here, 51K and a 15K. And they come down and they join the tone expander. And on the other side there we have, this is the negative feedback going through a little teeny tiny cap through a 1 meg resistor and hitting the cathode. Cathode comes down here and basically opens up this filter so current can pass through, and that cap will of course allow more warmth of tone. It'll allow warmth of tone to do its magic. So somebody's got it quite wrong here with these little resistors, and so the owner of this amp wants it returned to as much as possible to stock. So we're gonna do that. Of course, we can't get. There's not much point putting in capacitors that are 60 years old or 70 years old. This was 1949, so that makes it over 70 years old. So we'll do what we can. The other thing that was going on with this, my trusty tube tester, I have an ICO 667, showed me that this tube was dead. And then when I looked at this one, so these are the drivers here, these two. And one looks very dull and dead. You know, you can tell by the, I don't know if you can get a focus on that, but anyway, it's been around the block. This one seems to be a bit shinier and newer, so I think perhaps that's been replaced, and so they should have probably done both at the same time, but never mind. And this is the 6SJ7. Didn't test particularly well, so I'm going to replace that as well. And that's the preamp tube, of course. The others are 6V6s. The interesting thing about the 6Q7 is it's just has a single grid here, so it's a triode. But it has a couple of pentodes in it on pin 4 and 5. And they just go straight to ground. They look a little confusing when you first see the tube data sheet for them. But as soon as you know that the diode pins just get sent to ground, you're golden. Okay, so let's bust out the soldering iron. So, here it is, Gibson GA-30, restored back to the specs of the schematic. So we've got a tone, what is called a tone expander on the back here. It's really just a filter switch. Well, it's more than that. This has a 6SJ7 as the preamp tube, and this is grid biased, screen grid biased, and that's tied into the tone expander here. So actually this tone expander, when it switches, changes voltages considerably on the plate here, from about 143 to about 200, and so we get a bit of a pop when I switch it. So the design really means that you turn it down before you switch. So it's sounding sweet. I think there's a reason though we don't copy some of these older designs. This is not a particularly good way to be switching, you know, to try and get more gain. It's more a gain thing here than a tone expander. Although it does include a bypass capacitor in that system, so really what you're getting is a bypass when it's on high here. The actual regular tone control, bass this side, treble that side, but really it's just a filter. Do you want any bass in it at all? You just got to leave it switched, turned all the way to bass. And there you have it. Somebody has reconed these speakers at some point in recent years. They're very good cones in here. But the problem with the Alnico speakers is sometimes these old batteries do start to fade, the old Alnico, and so I suspect that they may have reconed the speakers, but the batteries I don't think are quite as punchy as they might once have been. So the amp is not without its charms. It has a certain nice quality to the tone. It has a fairly early breakup, and I think that's partly the design of the preamp being screen grid biased. But there you have it, GA-30, 1949 model, restored.